the president has just signed a bill that will end the national emergency declared during the COVID pandemic.
When it comes to things like Medicare, different kinds of health insurance, certain things that were available and that people could take advantage of will no longer exist.
Biden signs a bill ending COVID national emergency. The measure ends the national emergency a month earlier than the Biden administration had planned, prompting changes to some pandemic-related federal programs. I'm going to get you all the details because, yes, this is going to be impacting a lot of people. Now, in addition to that, people are wondering what's going to be happening with the leftover stimulus funds from previous packages. Take a look. There's $400 billion left over still just sitting there that was meant to go out to help the American people. What's going to be happening to those funds? And also, I'm going to get you caught up on the latest to exactly what they're saying is going to be impacted directly from HHS.gov, so that way you know the latest. Now, in addition to that, I'm going to have a word from today's video sponsor that's going to help out a lot of people on the channel, and I hope that you use them. I know I use them. I just did. I just got back from my vacation. You're going to want to stick around for that. But let's dive into the latest, get you caught up as to what's unfolding, and also, if you're somebody that's collecting Social Security or you've been getting those stimulus benefits, you want to know the latest, stick around to the end because I'm going to have an update for you on that as well. But let's go ahead and dive right in so that way you can see exactly what's unfolding, what's going to be impacted, and what you need to know for you and your family. Now, if you appreciate the updates, don't forget, smash the like button for me. Just takes a second, helps me out a ton. Thank you so much. And if you want to stay up to date on what's happening with Congress, the economy, everything going on, it's totally free. Why not? All you got to do is hit the subscribe button, turn on that notification bell, and I'll keep you up to speed on everything. But with that being said, you guys, let's go ahead and dive right in, take a look at the video footage and the articles so you know the latest. But very quickly, let's talk about VPNs, as today's video sponsor is private internet access. I use them whenever I'm traveling and I need to use public Wi-Fi and I want to keep my data safe. Whenever you're browsing online, and especially with public Wi-Fi, if you're using an unprotected device like a phone, a laptop, or a tablet, that device's data is at risk. Hackers that could be using the same Wi-Fi, they could easily steal your information, including your passwords, your keystrokes, even your personal photos. Now, a virtual private network, or a VPN for short, will hide your IP address and it will safeguard your internet connection through an encrypted tunnel. Private internet access helps you protect your personal data, and they even allow you region-restricted content. So if you're traveling anywhere in the world, you can still access your local shows on Netflix and more. And you can now use one private internet access subscription to protect an unlimited amount of devices all at the same time. So if you want to keep your personal data safe, use my link in the description below and get a 83% discount for private internet access. And that just comes out to $2.03 a month, and you'll get 4 months free thrown in. So don't wait. Use my link in the description below. Again, thanks to today's video sponsor. I know they'll be a blessing to you. It is so important to keep your information safe, especially when traveling. But now let's take a look at this video clip and get you caught up on the latest. And right after, I'm going to give you some more details.
Got some news just into us also out of the Biden administration, with the president taking a significant and symbolic step into a post-pandemic world. The White House is just now saying that the president has just signed a bill that will end the national emergency declared during the COVID pandemic. Remember, that's a state of emergency that had been in place for more than 3 years after then President Trump declared it in March of 2020. NBC's Monica Alba is joining us now. And Mon, it is not unexpected that the president signed this bill into law. Once it made it through Congress, the White House came out and essentially said, hey, President Biden opposes this, but he will sign it. It winds down this national emergency in May. This is symbolically significant. It may also have some real world impact here, right? Talk to us through it.
Exactly, Hallie. And this is something that House Republicans, when they took control, said they were going to do very quickly. And indeed, they introduced it. And when it passed, the White House said, look, we wouldn't like for this to become reality in February, which is when this was being discussed earlier. Let's see if we can get a little more time, because they wanted to give agencies, things like hospitals, anybody that deals with healthcare, a little bit of time to wind this down. Because once this national COVID emergency ends, a lot of things that are tied up in sort of the justification for how they were done. When it comes to things like Medicare, different kinds of health insurance, certain things could be authorized because they were citing this national COVID emergency. So once that's done, and in some cases 60 days after, certain things that were available and that people could take advantage of will no longer exist. And so indeed, President Biden said he wasn't going to veto this, that he was okay with signing it, even though he wasn't in favor of what much of the legislation says, because again, this was something that was put forward forth by House Republicans. But this is a little bit different from the public health emergency, which the White House has said is also going to expire just a couple of weeks from now in May, which is tied to another big implication here when we talk about immigration, something we've discussed many times on your show, and the fact that Title 42, which is that Trump-era public health policy, is essentially going to cease to exist. And then you really could see an influx, experts say, of migrants at the border seeking asylum who won't be turned away under that Title 42 authority. So that's still a couple of weeks away. But this is really a moment in time that the White House is marking and saying 3 years into the pandemic that it is no longer a national emergency, even though, of course, there are still things like vaccines, boosters, and discussions that this president wants to keep discussing and says are still important tools in battling COVID. Hallie.
You make an important distinction, Mom, between this and between the public health emergency. It does feel like the start over the next few weeks of this sort of moment. I think back to when you and I were covering the White House in, February, March of 2020, and the so many lives lost, right, to COVID, the way that people are looking to move beyond COVID now. That has been very clear, what you've seen from Americans' feelings about the pandemic and where the majority of Americans are. And it does feel a little bit like a time to sort of stop and take stock of where we are as a country.
Absolutely. And so I think what you're really speaking to there, Hallie, is this cultural shift that so many of us look around and see in our own families with our own friends. And then on top of that, we're seeing just a political dynamic change here as well with some of the things that were stood up that were really critical in those early days that many can look at now and say, thank God they're not as needed as they once were in the beginning when we knew so little and there was still so much sickness and death ahead.
Wow. So let me know your thoughts. They're saying after 3 years, the pandemic is officially coming to an end. It's going to be downgraded to an epidemic. And there's a lot of things, though, funding and other things that are going to linger on. I'm going to get you a list of exactly what is going to be impacted and what is not. We're going to cover that in just a second. But first, let's get some more details from this article that says President Joe Biden on Monday of this week signed into law a Republican-backed resolution that immediately terminates the coronavirus national emergency first declared back in March of 2020. The measure ends the national emergency a month earlier than the Biden administration had planned. A separate public health emergency tied to COVID will remain until May 11th. Biden had signaled that his opposition to ending the national emergency, but he said that he would not veto the legislation. Now, the Senate passed the measure 68-23 at the end of March, with nearly 24 Democrats supporting it. The House passed the legislation, introduced by Representative Paul Gosar in late January in a 220-210 vote along party lines. The vote to end the national emergency before May has caused the administration to wind down some of its emergency programs more quickly over the past few months and notify those affected by the changes, a senior administration official had said. Among the affected programs are mortgage forbearance at the Department of Housing and Urban Development and relaxed Veteran Affairs Department requirements for home visits to evaluate eligibility for caregiver assistance, officials said. An end to the public health emergency next month is expected to have a broader impact on policies like the Trump-era immigration program known as Title 42. Since he took office, Biden has come under harsh criticism from Republicans over his administration's COVID response, particularly over vaccinations and mask requirements. House Republicans are keeping our commitment to America, Speaker Kevin McCarthy tweeted earlier Monday, referring to a list of Republican priorities that includes removing the national emergency and ending the military vaccination mandate. Congress passed a military policy bill in December directing the Defense Department to lift COVID vaccination mandates for service members. House Republicans have also probed the origins of the coronavirus and requested documents from top Biden officials, including Dr. Anthony Fauci, who oversaw the virus response. So it is official that the state of emergency for the pandemic is going to be coming to an end. However, there is a lot of leftover funding, as you can see from the COVID money tracker, $400 billion to be exact, just sitting there, what's going to be happening to those funds, and also what exactly is going to be impacted and what is not as a result of what's unfolded this week. Well, let's take a look at the fact sheet for you directly from hhs.gov, the fact sheet COVID-19 Public Health Emergency Transition Roadmap. Now, I'm not going to read all the details, but I am going to give you the headlines, the bullet points for what is impacted and what is not, so that way you can see it for yourself. So first off, what will not be affected? Access to COVID-19 vaccinations and certain treatments such as Paxlovid and Lageviro will generally not be affected. FDA's EUAs for COVID-19 products, including tests, vaccines, and treatments, will not be affected. Major Medicare telehealth flexibilities will not be affected. Medicaid telehealth flexibilities will not be affected. The process for states to begin eligibility redetermination for Medicaid will not be affected. Access to opioid treatment programs will not be affected. Access to expanded methadone take-home doses for opioid use disorder treatments will not be affected. Now, here is what will be affected. Certain Medicare and Medicaid waivers and broad flexibilities for healthcare providers are no longer necessary and will come to an end. Coverage for COVID-19 testing for Americans will change. Reporting of COVID-19 laboratory results and immunization data to the CDC will change. Certain FDA COVID-19 related guidance documents for industry that affect clinical practice and supply chain will end or be temporarily extended. FDA's ability to detect early shortage or critical devices related to COVID-19 will be more limited. Public Readiness and Emergency Preparedness Act liability protections may be impacted. The ability of healthcare providers to safely dispense controlled substance via telemedicine without an in-person interaction is affected. However, there will be rulemaking that will propose to extend these flexibilities. So as you can see, there's a lot of things that are going to be impacted by this. However, there's a lot of things still kind of hanging in the air. And some of those is Social Security, Medicare, stimulus, leftover funds. I'm going to keep you up to date on all of those. Now, I've got some recent updates for you from this week. If you missed them, be sure to check them out. I'll put them on the screen right now. Be sure to click on them and you can see the latest on Social Security reform and also states still sending out stimulus funds that are available for people right now. So be sure to check those out next, and I'll be sure to keep you guys up to date as more information rolls out. But with that being said, you guys, thank you so much for joining me, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care. God bless. This is Steve.